Ready.
Great. So it looks like we have a few more people joining, but we can get started. So just a friendly reminder before we get started, this is a hearing for public testimony. We won't be responding directly to questions right now, but taking in your testimony as part of the rulemaking process. So let's begin. This is a public hearing on the proposed Washington Administrative Code, Chapter 194-50. My name is Dave Pringle. I'm Policy Advisor and Rulemaking Coordinator at the Department of Commerce, and I'll be the presiding officer for this virtual-only hearing. This hearing is being recorded to comply with the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act. The statement of inquiry for the proposed rules being considered today was filed as WSR 19-17-038, and the proposed rules were filed as WSR 20-17-129. The proposed rules would establish a state energy performance standard for non-residential buildings greater than 50,000 square feet, excluding agricultural and industrial buildings. The legislature directed Commerce to adopt by reference the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers Standard 100-2018. The legislature requires Commerce to include in the standard energy use intensity targets by building type and methods for conditional compliance that include an energy management plan, operations and maintenance program, energy efficiency audits, and investment in energy efficiency measures to meet target. The department worked with consultants and stakeholders over 15 rulemaking workshops and comment periods to modify the standard and incorporate technical, economic, and administrative features required by the law. Commerce worked with stakeholders and consultants to develop energy use intensity targets that are required by law to be no greater than the average energy use intensity for the covered Commerce worked with stakeholders and consultants to develop energy use intensity targets that are required by law to be no greater than the average energy use intensity for the covered commercial building type, with adjustments for unique energy features. For most buildings, Commerce proposes an energy use intensity target that is 15% less than the consultant's reported average to reflect continued adoption of efficiency technology in the most recently reported data. For building types with average EUI greater than 200, Commerce proposes a EUIT that is 30 EUI less than the average for that building type to acknowledge that a portion of the energy use in these buildings is likely process loads unrelated to building system. These proposed rules are explained further in a memo distributed to stakeholders when the proposed rules were published on September 2nd. You can view this memo on our webpage, commerce/growing-the-economy/energy/buildings. We are also accepting written comments. The deadline for written comments on the proposed rule is 5 p.m. today, September 22nd. Comments can be submitted to buildings@commerce.wa.gov. So as of 8 a.m. today, we had a handful of individuals who notified us that they would like to testify. Annika, would you please read those individuals and any organizations who sent us an RSVP earlier than today?
Yes, thanks, Dave. I have David Streeter from the Washington State Hospital Association, Robin Rothman from the Washington Healthcare Climate Alliance, Jeffrey W. Glass from Providence Health and Services, Holly Towns from the 43rd District Democrats Environmental Caucus, Cara Durbin from Puget Sound Energy. And Dave, from the chat box, we also have Amy Willis from Northwest Energy Coalition, Christine Bunch from City of Seattle, and also Bonnie Fry Hemphill from UMC. And then I also see that Gary Heiken on behalf of the Northwest Gas Association as well that I will include on the list.
Great. So if there's anyone else who wishes to testify but has not signed up already, I ask you to please put your name and organization in the chat box. For anyone who's called in and are unable to use the chat box, you can unmute yourselves now by using *6 and state your name and affiliation, and we'll add you to the list of testifiers. So we'll give everyone on the phone one more chance. If you'd like to testify, you may unmute yourself using *6 to add your name. Or use the chat box. All right. Well, I think we have our list of testifiers at the moment. We're going to ask everyone to keep their comments brief. I think with the number of folks we have. Monica, could you remind me how many people we have signed up to testify?
We currently have 8 people signed up to testify.
Okay, so we'll ask people to keep their comments under 5 minutes. We'll use a timer to help us keep track of the time. And a friendly reminder, this hearing is for purposes of hearing public testimony. Commerce staff will not be responding to questions right now unless they're related to just process for utilizing Zoom and testifying. We're solely here to listen to public testimony and take it into account. We'll continue the hearing until everyone who has signed up wishing to testify has had an opportunity to do so. Do we have any other questions? All right, I think we may begin.
Dave,
Monica?
I'm sorry, Gabe, I have the count or the timer at 2.5 minutes and give them time to wrap up. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share that soon.
So we'll post 2.5 minutes and that'll be kind of your warning light to wrap up your comments so everyone has time to speak. And Annika will list out names in order of who signed up.
Thanks, Dave. First, we have David Streeter from the Washington State Hospital Association.
Hi, good morning. For the record, my name is David Streeter, and I'm the Policy Director for Clinical and Data with the Washington State Hospital Association. On behalf of our association, I just want to say thank you to the staff at the Department of Commerce for their consistent engagement with us around the clean building issue. We really value the discussions that we had with department staff, and we are very appreciative that the department adopted several of our recommendations into this proposal. Particularly, we want to thank you for including the higher hospital EUI mean based on the 2019 CBSA study. We really appreciate that there's been a financial hardship exemption included. We also appreciate that our recommendations regarding hospitals as single-use activity buildings and our proposed exception for healthcare buildings were accepted into the charts in the back of the proposal. And then also just want to say thank you for clarifying the definition of more recently built buildings to include additions but not remodels. So again, thank you for accepting our recommendations during this process. This morning, I'd like to focus on the recommendations that we submitted to Commerce about ways that we can improve the current version of the proposal. The biggest thing that I'd like to discuss is that we were really surprised that this proposal did not include all of the ASHRAE 100 sections that are going to be incorporated into the law. We do understand that this is adopted by reference, but we felt that the explanation and the presentation of the current proposal was insufficient. And so our recommendation really is to take the feedback that you hear today and then reissue a revised CR 102 that has all of the information that's going to be included into this set of rules. And you can read more about that in the letter that I submitted. Other items that we recommend to you are increasing the contingency fund assumption in normative annex X3 Currently, it's set at 5% for projects, and we think that it needs to be raised to 15%, particularly for hospitals, given the financial constraints for hospitals. And I see that I'm at half my time here. The other key recommendations we'd like to make are that because this rule is so technical and there's a lot of components to it, we strongly recommend convening a hospital table within the resource work group that Commerce is currently convening. Hospitals will be very interested in contributing their expertise so that we can develop materials that work for our industry. And then lastly, we would be very interested in assisting with the development of implementation guidance and the development of trainings, because this is going to be something that does require a lot of training and guidance for hospitals and building owners in general. So with that, I just refer you to the letter that I submitted this morning, and I look forward to today's discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Robin Rothman from the Washington Healthcare Climate Alliance.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I am Robin Rothman, Associate Director of State Policy Programs at Healthcare Without Harm, and I lead the Washington Healthcare Climate Alliance. The Washington Healthcare Climate Alliance represents 40 hospitals and more than 950 healthcare facilities in the state. First, we want to echo Wish's comments, thanking the Department of Commerce for working with the healthcare sector on our unique facilities as you develop this rule. Healthcare Without Harm actually worked with 2 Washington health systems to support the passage of clean buildings legislation prior to the Washington Healthcare Climate Alliance being launched, and we strongly support the goals of the law. As Commerce moves towards the final rule, we have a few more requests for revisions. First, we think it's important to allow early compliance status for building owners who meet their EUI target requirements prior to the compliance deadline. Requiring building owners to wait until 2 years prior to the compliance date to both measure their 12-month EUI data and submit their applications will create extreme demands on the energy efficiency market, as well as the Commerce review process under tight deadlines. So we recommend that building owners be allowed to qualify for early compliance if they meet all the requirements during a 12-month period for any time after July 1, 2021. Allowing early compliance status will encourage all early adopters to meet the clean building requirements ahead of schedule, reduce the burdens on commerce and the market, and achieve the desired building emission reductions early. Second, we agree with the need to increase the contingency fund assumption for hospitals up to 15%. Hospitals are critical infrastructure and will be implementing energy improvements in occupied buildings. 95% of acute care hospitals in Washington are public or nonprofit hospitals. So we strongly urge that the contingency fund assumption be increased to 15%, which will also allow hospitals to do a more realistic calculation of how much they need to spend to achieve their EUI target. We think that the Energy Star Portfolio Manager definition of gross floor area should also be adopted. Portfolio Manager is currently used by hospitals and health systems, and we think to avoid confusion and burdensome recalculations that Commerce should just adopt the Portfolio Manager definition. Finally, we agree with WSHA on their recommendation to include hospital representatives in the development of implementation guidance, trainings, and resources. We think all of these specific healthcare buildings and the analysis required to comply needs our input, and we want to help industry understand and comply with this law. Thanks for this opportunity, and we look forward to working with you on implementation.
Thank you, Robin. Next, we have Jeffrey W. Glass from Providence Health and Services.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Glass, and I'm the Energy and Sustainability Manager for Providence Health and Services. We have 35 sites in Washington State that we think will be impacted by this law. That is to say, they're above 50,000 square feet commercial facilities. Providence Health and Services supports the stated goal of HB 1257 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by improving energy efficiency in commercial buildings. We believe that these greenhouse gas reductions will improve the health of citizens in Washington State, in turn enhancing our quality of life. We've been impressed with the outreach and professionalism of the Commerce team in developing these rules. We appreciate the transparency of this process, the openness of Commerce to invite public comment and to engage with impacted stakeholders when requested. I've been in this business for 40 years, and it's a personal anecdote. I've never seen a better public process in my life. So great credit to the Commerce staff for the process that they have developed. These rules are the first of their kind in any state in our country and are new to many commercial building owners in Washington State. As such, needed education, outreach, and guidance on implementation of these rules will require significant effort from the state to ensure the intent of the legislation is met. We ask that this effort be resourced sufficiently for the task at hand and offer our support to contribute as an advisory group on the implementation process. Finally, we ask that Commerce amend the compliance state such that buildings meeting the EUI target be allowed to submit necessary application and supporting documentation for compliance anytime between the notification of these requirements, July 1, 2021, and the stated compliance deadline. This change in implementation timeline would encourage early adoption in conjunction with the Early Adoption Grant Program, accelerate greenhouse gas reduction, and minimize impact on limited market capacity to complete this work, all goals of the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Next, we have Holly Towns from the 43rd District Democrats Environmental Caucus.
Holly, you're still muted. Please unmute yourself. We'll restart the timer.
Thank you. Got the video, but not the speaker. Hello, I'm Holly Towns. I'm a retired mechanical engineer who's been in building energy efficiency my whole life. And I'm happy to represent the 43rd District Democrats Environmental Caucus. Thank you for allowing us to testify. The use of carbon-based fuels and energy in these buildings that are affected by this law affects us all. And climate change is upon us, and we need a strong ruling that substantially reduces greenhouse gases in these buildings. While it is a good law and Commerce has done well in putting together these rules, its effects and whether it meets the intent of the law will depend on the details of this ruling. When passed, the intent of the law was clearly stated: maximize reductions of greenhouse gas emissions for the building sector. To meet this intent, the following changes in the rules are needed. First and foremost, the target needs to be higher than a 15% reduction for the calculated mean EUI. 15% is too conservative since it does not account for the oldness of the data being not just for Washington State and for the 68 years of inevitable improvements until requirements have to be met. 15% will not capture a majority of the buildings who can do cost-effective upgrades. A higher percent will mean more buildings are covered by the requirements. This means more job creation, so badly needed. Energy efficiency is a proven job creator, and businesses will rise to the occasion as they have in the past on other state requirements. I have experienced that myself in a small engineering business. A higher percent reduction will mean low EUI buildings like schools and offices will not be left out of the incentive pool. The target should be 25 to 35% reduction from the mean EUI. Department consultants have even said that this can be done without major equipment replacement. Also remember, an owner does not need to do anything that is not cost effective, so higher percentage is okay for building owners, and those building owners have 6 to 8 years to prepare for the requirements. Next, local jurisdictions need more generic language so they can use stricter building performance programs. Cities like Seattle, whose buildings are already more efficient than most in the state, should be rewarded for being willing to reduce greenhouse gases more. Also, the state does not have adequate data to understand the impact of this law and its rulings on greenhouse gas reduction, and to plan for meeting the state's goals. We really need better data sooner. The state should require benchmarking of buildings sooner and require greenhouse gas tracking in each building. Finally, the ruling needs to focus on greenhouse gas reduction. The biggest opportunity for greenhouse gas reduction is eliminating gas heating. Incentives should focus on this transition from electric to gas. Targets should also take gas heating into account. The investment criteria should include the cost of carbon. These are some of the changes we are recommending, and see our written comments for more details. The building sizes covered by this law are the major contributors of greenhouse gas emissions in the non-residential buildings. This law covers the next 10 years, and we cannot miss this opportunity to get substantial greenhouse gas reduction. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Holly. Next, we have Cara Durbin with Puget Sound Energy.
Good morning, Cara Durbin speaking on behalf of Puget Sound Energy. Thank you for the opportunity to comment this morning in the Clean Buildings rulemaking. PSC has been engaged since Commerce began this rulemaking last October, and like others have noted this morning, we just really appreciate the number of opportunities that Commerce has provided along the way for stakeholders to engage, ask questions, and provide feedback. PSC has provided feedback to Commerce throughout this rulemaking, and that's really been based on our experience in working with building owners to lower their energy consumption through energy efficiency programs. At this time, the main comment we want to make this morning is to reinforce the importance of developing clear guidelines for the early adoption incentive program. This was something that wasn't addressed through the current rulemaking. However, we really appreciate that Commerce has indicated that they intend to start a series of webinars in October to develop guidelines. As I said, we're very supportive of this, and we look forward to being actively engaged in the development of those guidelines so that the utilities can be ready when those incentives take effect next year. And we'll be submitting some written comments to that effect later today. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to be engaged in this important rulemaking, and we look forward to further conversations with Commerce and others going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. Next, we have Amy Willis with the Northwest Energy Coalition.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Willis. I'm a policy analyst at the Northwest Energy Coalition. Again, thank you to all the work from Commerce, its contractors, and of course, all the other stakeholders to develop this rule. I think this has the potential to be really impactful in further advancing energy efficiency in the state and could help spur economic recovery, which wasn't really on our horizon when this law passed in 2019. But I'm thankful that it's in place now. Overall, the Northwest Energy Coalition supports the draft rule and the overall approach for setting targets. I think the data and analysis done through this rulemaking shows you targets could easily be set further, especially since they're economic compliance pathways and the means are likely higher than what the reality is. But I just want to emphasize, but particularly for newer buildings, I think Commerce could go a little further. Our energy code gets more innovative every cycle, and buildings built under the 2015 code are going to be pretty different from the 2021 code. So the 15% below the standard targets doesn't seem quite right. We think a step target would be more accurate. Further, that given this rule will update over time, we think it's important to set a clear trajectory in the education and outreach, which we understand is not part of this rule, but is critical to implement. In the rule itself, however, we think Annex X should also reflect that reality. For example, when the measure life of an energy upgrade is longer than 5 years, the cost effectiveness of the measure should be considered in the context of these more stringent EOI targets that will be required in the next 5-year cycle. A few other quick points that I think other commenters have touched on. We agree that earlier benchmarking is needed. This data isn't due to Commerce until close to the compliance date, but more data sooner will help us identify those buildings that are going to need the most technical support to reach compliance. We need to track greenhouse gas emissions in some way to really understand the impact of this law. Energy Star Portfolio Manager provides an opportunity to easily collect this data. The emission factors will need to be updated, but I think this is a pretty quick and simple way to really understand what this law is accomplishing. The rule as written exempts vacant buildings, and we think that given that there are other financial hardship criteria, this should be reevaluated. This doesn't seem like to a needed exemption. In fact, vacant buildings are really prime targets for deep retrofits for energy, given they're not so many tenants to disturb. So we think Commerce should reevaluate that. And further, as Cara mentioned, education outreach will really be key. And I hope that the Commerce continues its good public process best practices on the development of that kind of guidance. I think there are a lot of bright minds, even on this call, that are ready to help. We will have some other specific comments when I submit written comments later today. And I appreciate all the work and the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Next, we have Christine Bunch from City of Seattle.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Christine Bunch. I'm the Climate and Energy Advisor with the City of Seattle. Thank you to the Commerce Buildings team for your hard work in the rulemaking process, especially during such a challenging time. And we appreciate the opportunity to provide comments on a rule that has such great potential to reduce harmful climate pollution from our communities, help save building owners and tenants in utility costs, and support local economies through job creation. Buildings are the fastest growing sector in emissions, and we urge you to take all actions necessary within the statute to maximize greenhouse gas emission reductions. Therefore, the City of Seattle recommends, in addition to the letter that we sent yesterday, that Commerce consider higher EUI target percent reductions of at least 25% below mean. The City of Seattle has concerns about setting a 15% below mean target that is based on outdated CBEX data from 2012. We understand from the consultants that it does not factor in the efficiencies in lighting and HVAC motors and other efficiency improvements since 2012, and it doesn't factor in the anticipated efficiency improvements over the next 6 years. We also request incorporating the social cost of greenhouse gas emissions in life cycle cost analysis and in the investment decisions. The statute does limit decarbonization through end use electrification due to the limiting scope of the savings to investment ratio definition. However, the statute does not explicitly exclude using the social cost of greenhouse gas emissions in the life cycle cost methodology for purposes of assisting building owners prioritize their investments. And we recommend that the rulemaking include a shadow cost of carbon or greenhouse gas emissions to raise the awareness for building owners. And that can also be further used to support how the state prioritizes distribution of state incentives. So again, while we recognize that there's limitations in the statute, we do believe that greenhouse gas emission social costs should be evaluated and incorporated wherever possible. In addition, we recommend that building owners be required to submit greenhouse gas emission information, which is available and as noted by other stakeholders on this call today via Energy Store portfolio manager calculations, and that is something that would not be a heavy lift for building owners. And I think as someone else noted, that it would have to be, the calculations would need to be reevaluated for Washington specific fuel mix. The reporting requirement for greenhouse gas emissions could be added to Annex Z, and again, we don't believe it would be a heavy lift. Again, the Clean Buildings Act legislative intent is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. However, we only know if this policy is successful if we have an accounting of these reductions. The City of Seattle has submitted these and additional comments in our letter submitted yesterday, and we look forward to continued engagement on the implementation of this policy. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you, Christine. Next, we have Gary Heikkinen from the Northwest Gas Association, and he is our final that we have included from the chat box.
Hi, thank you so much. For the record, Gary Heikkinen on behalf of the Northwest Gas Association. Northwest Gas Association is a trade organization representing the interests of 4 natural gas utilities in Washington State. Our members serve more than 100,000 commercial accounts in Washington, many of which will fall under the mandate of the Clean Buildings Act passed by the legislature in 2019. The NWGA supports Washington's efforts to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions and the Clean Buildings Bill signed into law in May 2019. We also support the use of ASHRAE Standard 100, 2018 as the model standard. The NWGA is concerned about the exclusive use of site-based energy use targets in the modified standard. The measure of energy consumption on site allows easy comparison of the operating efficiency of one appliance over another in isolation. However, it gives only a partial picture of total energy use by omitting the energy needed to mine, process, and transport the primary fuel to a generating plant, the energy used at the generating plant, and the energy used in delivering electricity or fuel to the site of operation of an appliance. For example, on-site energy consumption of an electric storage water heater might operate with 90% efficiency, a natural gas water heater with 65% efficiency. But energy losses occur in acquiring the primary fuel and in the generation, transmission, and distribution of the electricity, reducing the overall energy efficiency of the electric storage water heater to less than 50%, lower than the gas-fired storage water heater's full fuel cycle or source energy efficiency of about 60%. Therefore, using source energy targets provides a more accurate measurement of energy use and environmental impacts, especially greenhouse gas emissions. Consequently, the NWGA recommends replacing the site-based energy use intensity targets in Table 7.2a with source-based EUI targets.